What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into another edition of the Behind the Mic podcast, where we peel back the curtain on the sports media industry, find out all about those in the field, who they are, and what makes them tick. After the Celtics just won Banner 18, happy to be joined by none other than Channel 4, WBZ's own Dan Roche. Dan, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time.
Good to be here, Mike. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm excited because, again, it took a couple weeks off from the show, getting through Patriots mini camp, training camp, or getting ready for training camp, stuff like that. But Celtics just won the finals. So before we get into resume time, which is what we usually start this thing off with, I'm curious about your Celtics reaction and what it was like being at the Garden down there on Monday night. You've covered plenty of championships in this city before. Where does this one rank? Like, what was that all about? Because, again, this team was dominant for so long. So just your thoughts on what the Celtics did this season and how it all accumulated on Monday.
Yeah, I thought it was a coronation. I thought it was time.
Yeah.
What caught me I thought was fascinating about this particular Celtics team, and I've been big for a long time of taking every single team, every single year individually and almost just wiping the clean slate, looking what they have, and then watching them go through a year, because that's half the fun of it. Is if I'm a fan and you're a Patriots season ticket holder, we knew, that Brady, when that AFC Championship and Super Bowl run was underway, that, okay, what are the storylines? What is this? What is that? But
Right.
to me, it's always kind of fun to watch, a team go through the ups and downs of a season and then to see what you have. And I thought this Celtics team, after Wick mandated to Brad that we're not bringing back the same crew, and after what Brad was able to do, I thought it was pretty cool to watch them get together in the regular season. And I thought they changed on a daily, game-by-game basis in their playoff run and during their playoff run.
For sure.
And they answered all those questions that were looming over them for the last several years. Could they come back from a large deficit and get a win? They came back from 18, I think, against Indiana, did that. Could they pull out a game where they needed big shots from Brown and Tatum, and they got it, with Jalen with 6 seconds left in game 2 at the Garden, and then Tatum follows up with a huge 3 and an and 1 to kind of cement that deal. So that answered that question. And then can they get contributors on a consistent basis? Marcus Smart was great, but he was just so up and down. And Drew Holiday has the steal, and then the and 1 in the late stages of game 3 against Indiana as well. Derek White, a corner shot in game 4. So they had all these guys answer questions along the way. And by the time they got to the finals, I thought, now we're starting to see people come out with the stats that this might have been one of the greatest single season Celtics teams we've ever seen, and really in NBA history. And I thought I kind of got a sense of that as they went about their business kind of throughout the playoffs, like I mentioned, in answering those questions. So by the time they hit the Dallas series, I was shocked how many people picked the Mavericks and picked them to win. Yeah, nationally, because to me, if you follow this team, and that's the beauty of being a Celtics fan, if you follow the regular season and then day one of the playoffs, they changed along the way here. And I thought by the time they got back to the Garden, I thought they were going to sweep just for the symmetry of numbers and statistics with the 80-win season and the 16-2 and the 8-0 on the road. I thought all that was going to fall into place as far as winning and sweeping them. But then when the fact that they came out in the first few minutes of the first quarter at the Garden to play the way they played, I'm like, okay, this one's done, and they've got themselves a world championship.
Yeah, it was awesome. I thought it was huge. Again, as a fan, you're right. You'd like them to just get it over with and sweep in game 4, but at the same time, okay, you lose one, you are up 3-0. The odds are in your favor. Let's win it at home. And I'm sure that place was insane on Monday night. So definitely a good way to sort of sum it up. You're right. And you're right, too, because with everybody picking Dallas, it's like you mentioned, it's like nobody watched this team this year. They were, and now everyone notices, you mentioned, one of the best teams of all time. Like, they were always that this whole year. They were the amount of games they won by 20-plus points. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it's like it's astronomical compared to, the great teams or even, a normal team in the NBA. So it's like, they should get their flowers, and they're on top of the world right now.
And they weren't even the team that Brad built them to be.
Right.
Once Porzingis went down with that injury, you know what I mean? It was like you had this whole team built for this one special time, and that was the other thing. People didn't watch them enough when Porzingis was out there. This just watching them.
Yeah.
They weren't just good; they were dominating whenever Porzingis was in there and productive. And the fact that he went down again and got the tendon and the the Kurt Schilling type of injury. And I think
Right.
I heard there were only 32 cases of this injury in the world. That
insane.
scares me for the future going
I know.
forward for a guy like Porzingis. But you never really saw what we saw, the full Porzingis effect, and
Totally.
just how dominant a team they could be, and that he was that third best player on the team. So it was just like, man, they did that without him. Imagine how good they could be. And I hope for his sake that he gets healthy enough, even starting January 1st
Right.
next year, to show the NBA just how great the Celtics could be as a team.
100%. I'm with you. City of Champions back on top once again. And speaking of that, let's get into it. Let's get into sort of your resume. I like to start this off with, giving the floor to the guests and kind of go through your resume and take us to how you got to where you're at WBZ. Now, I know you've obviously been there for some time, so it might be a shorter one, but and sometimes people move around. You're unique in that you've stayed for so long. So what does Dan Roche's resume look like, and how did you get to where you are?
All right, so I'll just give you the full abridged version of my life.
Yeah.
and there's not much to me. I'm with my wife. I'll be out to dinner, and I'll say, yeah, I'm just a very shallow person. She goes, you're not shallow, you're simple.
There
and
you
I'm
go.
like, well, kind of both, you know what I mean? So I was one of those dorks growing up here, just loving Boston sports and and the Red Sox with Yaz and Dwight Evans and all the way through into the big bad Bruins and all the way through and the Patriots and John Hanna and Grogan and those guys too. And I just always wanted to be somehow involved in sports. So 7th grade, it dawned on me that I wanted to do 2 things in my life. One was play college baseball. I didn't care where, how, or when. And the other was to just get into the world of sports and journalism. So I went to North Andover High School. I was doing PA on the microphone for games and things like that by the time I graduated. Applied to Syracuse because I had heard that it was a great place for people to go to try to get into the business. Got accepted to Syracuse, and then my senior year on our baseball team, I had a game of my life type of game because I was just a 280 hitter who was slow, a second baseman who thought the game, and that was how I survived. We were playing in a state tournament game at Lynn's Frazier Field, and I went like 4 for 5, and I turned 2 double plays where I happened to be in the right position, stepped on second, through to first. And after the game, a coach from a small school in Maine called Nassau College in Springvale, Maine, came up to me and said, hey, are you playing college baseball? And I said, no, well, I'm going to Syracuse for journalism, blah, blah, blah. He goes, well, if you want to come up and play Division III program, we're a pretty good team. We need a second baseman. You'd be our starting second baseman from day one. So I talked to my dad. I had already put money down at Syracuse, and I said, hey, I'd like to go give this a shot. So he said, sure, go ahead. I went there, had the time of my life. But I got there and I dedicated my life to trying to play college baseball. So I went from 185 pounds when I left in mid-August to go to this school in Maine, and I came back to play Merrimack College in North Andover, where I grew up. And in October 5th or something, I weighed about 158 pounds.
Oh, wow.
So I gave everything I had, and my college baseball coach, we went bankrupt. And so the dean of the school came out in October and November and said, hey, we may not make it through the school year.
Oh, man.
So I started to think, but it was kind of cool because the teachers, they really were afraid they weren't going to get paid anymore. So we were getting decent grades from all the teachers. And so I basically took a gap year and played baseball. And my college coach, Steve Almonte, who's living down the Cape now and has a baseball academy down there, what have you, he said to me, and this was back then, there weren't a lot of internet sources and stuff, but I had the Charlie Lau book of hitting, loved George Brett, loved that style of hitting, and I hit that way in college. And he said to me after working my tail off, he said, you have the closest swing from the right-hand side of the plate I've ever seen to George Brett, except you just can't hit the ball, right? So
there you go.
Yes. So that was my sign to make sure I got out of that, right? And then I went to Syracuse for 4 years. And I went to my roommate urged me to go to a student-run radio station meeting just to find out about it. And I walked up and introduced myself to Sean McDonough. And he said, listen, this is what you need to do, this, and this. And then I just worked my tail off, and it was the dork with this, the microphone and the little recorder, calling Syracuse games from way up above courtside, and 35,000 people. Gradually got into a rotation and kept doing that. And my senior year, I took classes that ended, especially on Friday, at about 10 a.m. So I took 2 classes in the morning, and then I would get in my old Chevy Vega piece of crap car, drive from Syracuse to my home here, put in a quart of oil every other rest stop, and had the time of my life. But I worked, Saturday and Sunday. Saturday, all day Saturday at a radio station that Kurt Gowdy owned here in Lawrence.
Oh, wow.
And then I did that my senior year, and then I slid into that right out of college and kept working at it. Then I met a few people, did Red Sox pre and post game shows on WRKO and the radio, and then eventually led to BZ radio, and that eventually led to BZ TV. And that's where I've been since 2001.
That's pretty cool. And it's cool, I think, too, like, the everyone talks about their journey and they're all different and nothing's linear in this business. And that's totally, that's sort of what I gotten from this show so far. But like, it's interesting that, you kind of, a bunch of different things happened, obviously the baseball stuff you mentioned, doing the student radio and things like that. And then all of a sudden you just it's almost like a lot happened fast. And then you got to BZ and you've been there now for so long. It's like been 20 plus years if I have that right. So, and that's unique. I feel like a lot of people kind of move around the business and maybe try, not try different things because you've done plenty of different things, but like don't end up sticking somewhere for so long. So I'm curious how that's been, because you've obviously seen the industry change, but from the same lens at BZ. So what has that been like? And, how unique is that to kind of be at the same spot for so long?
Yeah. And it's kind of strange. My whole philosophy in life, and I received what they called the Ducky Wolliver Award at that school at Nassau College for baseball. It was called the Never Say Die Award. And what I found out in trying to be the best college baseball player I could ever be was that if you work your tail off, something will come of it. And not necessarily sometimes it's great, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's okay, sometimes it might be bad.
Sure.
But if you work your tail off, something good will come of it. And I think you know me well enough that I don't have the most talent in the world. And especially being at Syracuse, I was with, Mike Tirico was a buddy that I hung around with and to this day, and Sean McDonough was there, and Greg Papa, who's now, been the voice of the Raiders and the 49ers, and all these people that I've worked with and met along the way. They all had more talent than I did, but I would guarantee you that no one was going to outwork me. And that's kind of how I've lived my life. Yeah. So if you give me a job, I'll say, listen, tell me what I need to do, pay me whatever you want to pay me, and here we go. So that's kind of where I was able to bounce from place to place to place. It took a little longer sometimes. I was at the Kurt Gowdy radio stations for 10 years before I got a break into the market in Boston. But it was just hard work, perseverance, going to Fenway Park because Kurt Gowdy's name would get me a media pass, and, following around Nick Cafardo and Johnny Miller from WBZ Radio and just trying to learn from them and just, kind of keeping a positive attitude and saying hi and meeting people. I hate the word network. It's never, it's one of those things that just makes me cringe every time I hear it. I was more just like, ask questions. Yeah. Speak when you need to speak and just find out and be curious. That kind of way. There's a Ted Lasso reference. Be curious, right? Yeah. And then that led to better things. And then I was in radio and I was content. And this is one of those things, if you're always around, if you keep working hard. Bob Lobel had back surgery in August of 2000. Okay. And they needed someone to fill in. And they asked me if I'd do it. I said, sure. I had never done television before. But I said, I know radio and what have you. And I was right next to the TV station in the building. So I would look at things and learn things. And then I just went on the air. To this day, I never had coaching. I've never had people say, you need to do this. You need to look this way and turn to the camera and say, hey. Right. I've just looked at the camera and started talking. And kind of gone from there with a background of having a good knowledge of what I'm talking about. And then I just, I went and a position opened up. Gary Tangway left. So the position opened up on the TV side and I went for it. And I was one of many candidates. And I told the news director at the time, Peter Brown, and I talked to my dad about the decision and everything else because I loved radio. Yeah. I said, I think I'm going to go for it. And Peter Brown said, why should we give you this job? And I gave it one of those stupid Tom Brady things where I said, if you hire me at some point, I don't know when, but you'll say, thank you for being here and doing the job that you're doing. And that's kind of how I took a gamble on myself, and they took a gamble on me with no TV experience. And I was able to get by. And I remember covering when Ted Williams died, they froze him, right? His son froze him. And they sent me down there, and I was just a kid going down there to do a story on the greatest hitter who ever lived, in my opinion. So this whole story broke, and I was beating CNNs of the world and all the local TV news people because I was knocking on the door and saying, "Hey, I'm sorry for your loss," to his family members and friends. I'm just here, and I was honest. I said, "I'm just here covering the greatest hitter who ever lived. What can you tell me about this whole situation?"
Yeah.
And I was able to break a lot of stories and have some really good interviews and stuff like that for 2 weeks down in Florida because of that kind of relationship that I would build with people. So I think, like I said, what you see is what you get with me. There's not much to me besides that. So that's how I stuck. And then I just continued to have a blast at BZ Radio, and new things, BZ TV, new things just kept coming my way. We had the Red Sox for 3 years, and I became the guy in the stands and doing that, and then pre and post game shows on Friday Night Baseball. And it was a great opportunity, and we were there the 03, 04, and 05 Red Sox seasons. So, we had the heartache of Boone and Wakefield in 2003, and then the curse ending in 2004, and then everyone wanted to talk about 2004 and 2005. So I did that, and then I went into the Patriots, and we've been doing the Patriots, fifth quarter post game show, pre and post, and so there's always been something good at BZ. To go hand in hand with me, just new challenges, new fun, and it's worked out tremendous. And yes, I've been blessed to be there. I think coming up on my 25th season, so that's a lot of fun.
It's incredible. I have one question on that, but first, just you mentioned Red Sox, you mentioned Patriots. Obviously, we're just the Celtics, and I don't know if you can give me a good, not a good answer, but an answer to this. What has been like your favorite team to cover and your favorite sport to cover, like, because you've been around all four? What's the one that stands out over the last 20 years?
It's got to be the 03, 04 teams.
Okay.
You know what I mean, with the Red Sox, because we were just like, we were new to what we were trying to do. So they let me do with our Red Sox show. The Red Sox let me do whatever I wanted to do, basically.
Yeah.
So I just kept coming up with ideas. So by the time I got to, the October of 2004, they all knew me and I knew them. And along the way, I had so much fun doing features. Kevin Millar would set up a lot of features for me, and he would take me to the back room and how they studied videotape, and I'd put together a feature and put it out on our Red Sox show, and the front office would say, "He let you do that?" You know what I mean?
Right. Why are you giving him all this information?
Yes. And I did a story. Manny had fixed up a car, so he invited me and a photographer and Ricky Gutierrez and him to go 2 hours outside of Chicago one August day, an off day in Chicago, and he let me put a mic on him, and they restored a car. You know what I mean? Wow. So I got to know Manny doing things like that. So by the end of the way that season ended, those 2 seasons, I had their trust.
Yeah.
So if there was ever a bad story that came up, if there was ever someone screwing up, which happened on that team, they would always come to me and say, "Hey, can you do something? What do you think we can do?" And things like that. So, and then just what they were able to do. I mean, I was a kid who grew up with, like I said, watching the Red Sox and just struggled for the most part. When I was growing up, if they were in contention on Labor Day, it was a great season, right, to be a fan.
Yeah.
And I think you know me well enough. I'm an optimist, so I think they like that attitude. And I was always asking questions about the game. I'd sit with Johnny Damon and say, "Hey, Johnny, who's the toughest guy to hit? Why? His slider, his David Cohn and things like that." So that I just wouldn't talk, negative stories or something that came up or breaking news. It would always just be getting that base. I'd ask how their family's doing and all that kind of stuff. So that year, when the fact that was done, was pretty cool. And then in 05, I got a phone call, in April as they were getting set to open up a Yankee Stadium. And it was, Tom Warner saying, "Hey, we want to give you a World Series ring." And that's one of the things
cool. I didn't know
have.
that.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that will be fought over in my family when I'm long gone.
Right. That's awesome. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
But it does say UPN 38 on the side. That's the only thing. I'm like, could it have just said TV 38?
Yeah.
WSBK. We were UPN back there. You know what I mean? It's like, that's gone.
That's funny. That's awesome.
Still cool.
That's a cool story. So Red Sox, Patriots, again, all four as sort of a general sports reporter.
And the Revs.
And the Revs. There you go. All five. Sorry. But I feel like, at least from when we've interacted and I've been around you down in Foxborough on the Patriots beat, you have a knack to like always be the first in the scrum and the first in an important scrum, whether it's post game, whether it's locker room on like a Thursday, something big happens. I've just noticed that you've always been the guy, and you've been the one to sort of take the responsibility of like the first question and ask about whether it's easy, hard, win, loss. but you're always there. Now, what I'm curious about is that an internal thing where, like, as a competitor, you want to get there and be first? Is that something you feel like has been earned as the guy for, 20 plus years? Because, and one thing I noticed about it was, I think it might have been last year or 2 years ago, where at Patriots, it was after Jack Jones had gotten arrested. And as reporters, we had to come up with like 3 questions, and we only had 3 questions per PR that we could talk to Jack Jones about.
Yep.
And we were like, all right, Roche will go first. And that always stuck with me. Like, he's the first guy. How does that happen? So I'm just curious if that's something that is, and I'll watch a Bruins game, I'll watch a Celtics game, and you're the first voice I hear post game in the locker room. So I've always kind of wondered where that came from. If that's something you consciously do, it's just your subconscious being the first guy, or like how that kind of comes about.
That's a good question, because there's layers to that one, and I'll just quickly go through. One is Johnny Miller,
okay,
from WBZ, right? Mm-hmm. He following him around and covering the Red Sox and everything else. He was always the first question, and it was just kind of like a show of respect to Johnny, what have you. Okay. But not for me in that sense. If now a lot of it too is a lot of people, you'll go into, you go into a scrum and it's kind of quiet. Nobody asks that first question. So I'm not shy. I've always been like, you know what? I'm going to ask a question. And I'm always looking specifically for TV bites, right, too?
Right.
So a lot of the beat writers, what you people do a lot of times is like you try to go in and ask them certain questions to get to where you're going and doing a feature or what have you. For me, it's like, hey, what did you think of tonight's game? What's your reaction to that? It's a simple question, and it kind of breaks the ice, but also it gives me a TV answer. I always say, give me 18 to 20 seconds, out cue, glad we got it done tonight, right? It's just like the simplest of answers.
Right.
So, and I find that if you do that, it kind of breaks the ice and gets everybody going. So that's all part of that too. And I think the Jack Jones thing is, I go back to what I said with the Red Sox. I think everybody trusts me that I'm not going to, and again, a guy like that in that situation who was, had been arrested and what have you, and was going through the whole process of trying to prove his innocence and what have you. You just you don't want to go at him right with, did you do it? You know what I mean? And you'd be surprised. A lot of times people, they make fun of me, and I get it and everything else. Oh, yes, the simplest questions, sometimes they're dumb questions. Well, to me, there's no dumb question. I learned that at Syracuse, right? So, but the second part is a lot of times, if you look back on the history of great answers, it's basically because they trust you or you ask a simple question, right? So, like with Pedro, the night that he said, you might as well call the Yankees my daddy, it was, how'd you feel out there tonight? Right. Yeah. So it's like not this like probing question.
Yeah. Right.
But he trusts me, and he's got something on his mind. He wanted to say that. You know what I mean? So it's, I think, and Tom Cuddy from BZ Radio asked Rick Pitino, the infamous, Larry Bird's not walking through that door. It was just a simple question, but Pitino wanted to say that in that press conference. Mm-hmm. So for me and the Patriots and everybody, and I think you guys, you all trust me. Right. That if we have 3 questions, I'm going to say, hey, what's it like to be on that football field again for you with all you've gone through? If you say it right, you kind of get him to relax a little bit and go that way. That's
interesting. That's super cool. And it's something I've always kind of wanted to ask, even just, shooting the crap down with you there, but that's a good answer, and it makes a ton of sense. So you've done a lot of TV. You've obviously done some radio with Where Before. You've also done some stuff on the Sports Hub. You've done a little bit of writing in the past. But just in general, even whether it's that or whether it's just something different, what is like your ultimate favorite part of working in this business? Like, what do you love more than anything being here?
Wow. You know what I love? It's and it's harder to do nowadays because let's face it, we know this business is not easy, and it's dwindling in numbers and what have you. It's getting harder and harder. My thing is basically what I just got done. Right. So basically the station says to me, hey, the Celtics are in the playoffs. And we say to them, hey, this team has a legitimate, great chance of winning an NBA championship. So let me cover them every day. You know what I mean? So I like being around a team every day, or as much as I can be, so that by the time you're done, you have a trust and a feeling of like, hey, I did the best job that I could do in covering a team, and you get to know these players, you get relationships, and they get to know you, and that trust factor, like I said. And I just think that's fun. I just thought the Celtics run was tremendous for a lot of reasons, but for me, it was tremendous because you'd see them all the time, you get to know them a little bit, and you just watch them, and you know their tendencies, you know what they're going to say, you know what they're going to do, You know why they didn't win on a certain night. You know why they won, and you start to understand. It's like Joe Mazzulla in year one. You know, he could get agitated with a lot of the, especially my TV type of questions,
right?
Because you kind of makes you look like you don't really know the game, and that was the thing I got taught a long time ago is try to get to know the game as well as you can, because it's respected by the people that you're covering. But then Missoula, like this year, he kind of got it more and more. And when you're around and then you start asking questions, they have a little bit more respect for you and will give you better answers and stuff. And, I've had conversations with PR people and players and managers. So listen, I'm not out there to ask these probing questions about why you did a certain move and the pick and roll and things like that. I'm here to tell a story about what you guys are doing. So anytime I could be around a team for a good amount of time, it's good. Yeah. And, it's just like going to the Frozen Four this year was fun for me. And just being around the teams, practicing games and everything else with BU, BC. It was just, I love those things. And I still love the games. Like that's what I love. It's like, I'd hate to be stuck on an anchor desk in a studio 5 days a week, because for me, it's like getting out and talking to people, but then watching the games. Like that's no matter, you can say whatever you want about the Patriots, right? This year, you can say about Brady, you can say about, they made a mistake with Mac Jones and now it's Drake May. But we're going to get to watch on game day him try to grow and become a really good NFL quarterback. And that to me is like, I always turn around and say, who wouldn't want to be in my position? Who wouldn't want to be in Dallas for games 3 and 4? Right. And then at the Garden Monday night. That's kind of the stuff that I always feel, and it still gets me going. I'm at a high school football game. I'm at a championship game and a state tournament game in high school. I'm at the Bean Pot. Yeah. I'm at a Frozen Four all the way up to the pros. It's still a game, and you don't know the outcome, and you don't know what you can see that night or that day. So that's the passion that I have, the love that I have are those games, and then just kind of being around those teams. It's fun.
That's awesome, and it's like you said, it is it's a dream job, and it's something. I mean, you mentioned it. You said it when you were 7 years old that you wanted to do it. So to see it all come together is obviously super cool. But what stinks? What's the least favorite part? What is like, and again, I ask this question on every show, and I always preface it with, we're talking about a dream job here. We're talking about covering sports for a living. So like, we get that it's great, but what is something that people might not know is kind of a pain in the ass, frankly.
Well, the hardest part of my job has always been, it's having to work every single weekend, basically my whole career. Right. But again, I told you, like, I'm fine not being that, news anchor, sports anchor, 5 days a week, Sunday through Thursday, working 3 to 11 or what have you.
Sure.
But working every weekend, there were times when it got real tiresome and real hard, especially when the kids were in ages where I wanted to spend as much time as I could with them. And I've always been, way before, even when I started, guys would go out for beers or what have you after newscasts or after games and everything else. I've always been, I'm either working or I'm home with my family. And my friends found that out quickly. It's just I give everything to my family. Yep. And having to work weekends, is, thank God for my wife who was in this business early on, and she knew that's the, no question about it, hardest part for me, because missing some of the things. But I tried so hard to make games. Every game that my daughter and my son had, I tried to be there as many times as I could. I'd be watching on my iPad. I remember watching the Wizards Celtics playoffs and my iPad, trying to watch my daughter play a softball game for Babson in a tournament. So they know that I was there, and there'd be phone calls before and afterwards and everything else. But it was still, I wanted to be there more. And then funny times I'd tape a sportscast on a Friday night after we were done at 11 o'clock, and it would run Saturday morning. It's, between news and 6 and 8 o'clock. And I'd be at my daughter's softball game at 8:15 with a cup of coffee and the papers in my hand, happy to be there. Yeah. And people would come up and say, "How'd you get here so fast?" And I'd be like, I had changed my suit as I was driving, and now here, relax and everything else. But yeah, the people who know me know that that's the most important thing in my life by far, is my family.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it makes sense too. It's like, and again, that's why I preface it with, well, I mean, there's not much to complain about. We're in, sports locker rooms all day and people love it, but you're right. It's sometimes it can be tough. So, all right, before I wrap it up with our fast 5 to finish rapid fire, just quickly, and this one's a tough, I like to ask this question every time too, because I'm curious as to, where people's minds are as far as like, not moving on, but really what's next and what they aspire to do next. But it is tough with you because you've been at BZ for so long. But But what do you think is next for Dan Roche? Is there another step? Is there, and again, it's hard because you've been in one place for so long, but has there ever been, I guess, a point in time then where you've kind of thought maybe go somewhere else or move on or things like that?
That's a great question, and it hasn't really come, still to this day, my wife, it drives her crazy. Because she'll say, "What are your dreams?"
Right.
Even as I get older and what have you, and I've been at a station for this longest time, and it's like I don't really have them. Like, I'm content. You know what I mean? I wake up happy every day, and I get to go do a job that I love, and I have my family and everything else. So for me, it's just like to continue to do that, and it's harder and harder, as we discussed. You know what I mean? It's just not an easy job.
Right.
But I've always been one that if you work as hard as you possibly can and do a good job and treat people well, that something will come up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And those are the kind of things that I've relished in my life. Just a little thing. It could be a little thing. It could be a simple thing. Having the opportunity to, do PA at Fenway Park after Carl Bean passed away, who I loved.
Right.
Just do the guest spot. Okay, check that off the bucket list. So it's like all those kind of things. Getting to do preseason TV play-by-play of the Patriots, for 8 seasons or what have you, how many that we did it. Like, that was awesome. It was during the whole Brady, greatness of Brady and winning Super Bowls and everything else. And I basically fell into that job where they said, "Hey, why don't you, I got an idea." Matt Smith down there at KSB Productions said, "Why don't you try out for it?" And I did. So, and I ended up doing it and had the time of my life. So, I've always looked at it. If you work hard enough, good things will happen. And I still take that attitude today. So I don't know what it could be.
Yeah.
And, I don't know where I'm going and who knows in this business, because, it's not easy. And someday they could say you're done. And I'm like, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'd kind of take it one step at a time and one day at a time. It sounds corny as heck.
It's the truth, though.
But yeah, it's totally the truth,
Yeah.
And so, I always thought now too, if I ever got, fired tomorrow, I could be a good funeral director. Right, because I have dark suits, and white shirts and ties. That's basically how you survive in our business. And I'm sorry for your loss. If there's anything I can do to help you and your family, please let me know.
People trust you, right? There you go. Exactly. That's good. All right. Well, that's a good answer too. I love it. All right. Before we get you out of here, Roche, fast 5 to finish. 5 rapid fire questions. Number 1 is, what is your favorite thing to do outside of sports?
Right now, it's probably golf.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not great at it, but it's just fun. It kind of, day on the golf course, as they say, is a day away from the world. So that's probably number 1 in my life at this time. But it changes that, but I see it's sports. Like, going to Cape League games, going to things like that too is pretty cool. So, but
Love
yes,
it.
golf.
All right. Number 2, what is the most memorable moment you've had working in this industry?
Probably being on a duck boat with Trot Nixon, Gabe Kapler, Doug Mirabelli, and Jason Veritek after they won in 2004. We snuck onto a duck boat at Fenway Park where some Red Sox official said, if you and your cameraman wanted to jump on one of these, I would look the other way. And That's awesome. Next year, there was a rule written in courtesy of us that people couldn't be on the duck boat like that because we were on the Charles River when the duck boats went into the water outside the Museum of Science, and it was basically me and Trot stuck in the back talking while everybody else had the views from afar. We were right there looking at the views of the people watching and the thousands lined on the bridge and stuff there. So that was just really cool because awesome. Trot and I just talked. You know what I mean? Trot can talk with anybody. So that was probably my number 1 highlight when it comes to that. And then we all say the 28-3 game, the comeback by thing, and just watching the players be stunned and exhausted at what they were able to accomplish. So those are 2 that stick out right there.
That's awesome. Number 3, what is the best advice you've received working in sports media?
Be yourself. Easy. 2 words. A guy that I worked for 55 years was the program director of Kirk Gowdy's radio stations in Lawrence, Massachusetts, the AM. He was the AM program director. And he had said to me early on, no matter what, you can look in the mirror, wake up every day, be yourself. And the cool thing about him, he's passed along, but I think my wife and I were the 11th of 13 couples that he put together in his 55 years at that radio station where we had never met. None of these couples, the 2 people had never met prior to working for him. He put them together. He would hammer us every day saying, you 2 belong together. You 2 belong together. And then we eventually would get together, and all 13 of us that he put together we're all couples. We're all still married.
That's
we all
incredible.
have kids, and we all check in with each other once in a while. So that was kind of the one thing. He was the one who said, be yourself, but he also helped me and find the greatest thing in my life, which is
that's insane.
That's
That's
cool.
a cool story. Yeah. And again, you mentioned everyone's still together. In this day and age, to go 13
Yes.
for 13. That's legit. All right.
I know, right?
Wow. He could have been a matchmaker, not just a PD.
Yes. And he could have made good money at it too.
Yeah, right. Wow, that's insane. All right, number 4. What do you think you'd be doing? What would your profession be if you weren't working in sports?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. I think a funeral director would be number one, right? Because it's the only thing I can't.
You're
do.
too nice. You're too like uppity and happy to be a funeral.
Well, the funny thing is, when I joined LinkedIn, when it first came out, I didn't know. I just filled out, basically you put your resume down on LinkedIn, right, and it kind of goes. And I put in. I made the mistake of putting in sports anchor, reporter, and host. So to this day, I'll look at my LinkedIn. Well, I don't check in much off, but I get these notices saying, hey, there's a opening as a Chili's host at a restaurant. So I think I could be a maitre d' or something like that at a restaurant. That's my next gift in life, perhaps.
That's funny. All right, we'll wrap it up with this one. Number 5. What is your favorite pizza topping, Dan Roche?
It's weird. It's pepperoni. It used to be pepperoni,
Okay.
but as I've gotten a little bit older, I have to restrict the pepperoni usage unless I eat a roll of Tums with me as I eat it.
Yep.
But yes, no question about it. I have always loved pepperoni, and it's been one of those things. That and just the cheese. A good cheese pizza is great to me.
Classic.
I remember one time as a kid, I stole a pizza from my parents as they brought a couple pizzas in for a party. And I loved the cheese and the sauce so much that I ate an entire large pizza, just the cheese and the sauce, and literally gave it up a few hours later.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
But pepperoni pizza by far is my favorite.
Love it. That's funny. All right. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you doing this.
A pleasure. Appreciate you too, Mike. Keep up the good work.
Appreciate that. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. This was episode 10. If you haven't seen any of the rest of them, you can check us out on YouTube, Behind the Mic Podcast, and follow on social media at Behind Mic Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Until next time, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.